Hey, everybody, and welcome to How to Make Films and Influence People with Peter and Andrew, where we talk about our own approach to screenwriting and filmmaking, discuss great works of cinema, and blasphemously imagine how they could be remade. This week, we'll be talking about Spirited Away, giving an update on our current screenplay project that you, the audience, have been contributing to. But first of all, I'm Peter, successful filmmaker, film professor, and screenwriter, and this is Andrew.
Filmmaker, screenwriter, but not a parfumier by choice.
We wanted to update everybody on our screenplay project. We've been a little bit distracted and disrupted by the Christmas holiday season. So there's been a little bit of some challenges there just in finding the time to work on this. And this actually leads great into a question that we have from a listener. This is from Ted, who wrote in asking, how do you find time to write? I've got all these ideas, but I never can find the time to actually sit down and write them. How do you make that work for you? And I thought that was a very appropriate question. Thank you, Ted, for writing in. But considering especially the challenges we've had recently with coordinating our schedules, and I think it is a little bit different when, depending on your circumstances. If you're hired to write something, it's going to be a little bit different than if you're just writing something for fun. And if you're writing with another person, that's going to be a little bit different. But Andrew, what comes to mind when you hear that question?
I think number one is you got to schedule it. It can't be a thing that you just hope you have time for. It's like it's got to be a specific time in a calendar. This is when I'm doing it. And you tell everybody, this is when I'm doing this. I'm not scheduling anything else. That's like the only way that I was able ever to really get time to write. Just because you'll find other things that have to do. And if it's not your job to write, if you're not getting paid, then it's like something you have to plan around. I know that's how we have to do it. We have a scheduled time that works for us.
Yeah, and I think that works. I mean, with us, and we've mentioned this before, but we're taking a little bit of a slower pace with this in a time that works for us to come together. I've written things at faster paces on my own or at different times, but I think this works really well for our goals, which is especially we weren't hired to write this. This is something that we're just coming up with on our own, and we wanted to emphasize and prioritize us working on it together and finding the time to do that. Sometimes people writing a script together might go off, one person write a big chunk of it, another person write a big chunk of it, and you come back together. I've done that and it works too, but we've really prioritized actively doing it together. And that means then finding time that our schedules coordinate. But I totally agree. The actual scheduling, I find also having deadlines makes a big difference. And we haven't really approached it that way with this project, but I think when I have been hired to write something and there actually is a deadline, then that's really bearing down. Somehow you can find the time to write when you know you need to get it done in a different way than if you're just sort of casually working on something. And I think that's yeah. If someone has hired you to write something and it's due at a certain time, or you're writing something for a class and it's due at a certain time, then that sort of is self-explanatory. But I think as a writer working on your own stuff, one tip I would give is create those deadlines for yourself. Whether it's just an arbitrary, I'm going to write it in the calendar, and this is when I want to have the script done, or this act's done, or this many pages done. But I'm going to maybe you write it in the calendar. Maybe also you think here's a competition that I want to enter, and the deadline for that competition is on this date. I'm of mixed opinion on screenplay competitions, but I think one of the big benefits is that they force you to have a script done by a certain date, and I think having that deadline can be really useful. And so that's another approach. But I think it's a question that, as a writer, often this work you need to be in the right headspace for, but you also can't wait until you're just perfectly in the right headspace for. You need to create the environment that lets you do the work. Uh, I find
Yeah.
there's some kinds of work when I'm doing logistical things. When, for instance, if I'm directing a film, there's some things that are creative where I need a fair amount of time to just think through, and some things where it's a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet is a little bit easier to fit around other things. The actual creative side of things, you need to make the real time for.
Right. And if you're not because you're just waiting until you feel creative to do it. That may never come. But setting up a time where it's like, I'm going to write something no matter what. And then even if it's bad, a lot of times once you start doing it, you're going to get into it and you'll have fun with it. But, getting yourself there, sometimes it takes 15, 30 minutes to really get into the groove of writing. But if you don't set that apart, it may never happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just based on what you just said, I also think when you finish writing, and in terms of when you start off, it might be bad. It might take you a little while to get into the groove of it. One thing that we've been doing and that I like doing is when you are writing, when you're finishing up for the day, thinking about and actually writing down what are you going to work on next time you start writing, so that
Mm.
you don't have to be starting from scratch next time you start writing, but that you already have an idea that you can sort of check in with about, okay, here's where the scene needs to go from here, or here's what the next scene is that I want to write. And that, I think, can help you make that time more useful.
That's a good point. Because we've been doing that. Because it's hard to just, step away and be like, where was I? What were we talking about? And for us, it's like we always like to end on, okay, so the next scene is going to be this. And we kind of write like a quick outline of what it's going to be about. And then it's really easy to just be like, okay, this is where we are in the story. So that's very helpful to just continue your progress, even if you're going to have a gap in between where it's not every day.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, great question, Ted. I think that's something that all of us as writers deal with, and I hope that you find the time to work on your project. All right, so Andrew, what have you been watching before we get into our film of the week? What have you been watching?
This week I saw a movie called Marty Supreme. Um, when me and my wife went to see this in theaters, and I've seen other Safdie brothers movies. I saw Uncut Gems. I've seen Good Times, and this movie feels very similar in kind of the energy and the tone of those previous movies. I thought it was really fun. It's very high tension, very stressful. If you know these movies, and it's just kind of a nonstop energy to this, even though there are some slower parts to it, but it's just you feel this tension and energy the whole time, which I think is really crazy how a filmmaker can just make you feel this the whole movie from start to finish. And it's definitely like their style. I guess this one is just one of the brothers, Josh, but you just notice the style right away. As soon as you start the movie, you're like, this is different than other movies. This guy has a vision. He's got his own perspective. It's almost like when you watch a Tarantino, like right away, this is a Tarantino movie. There's nothing like it. I feel that way with Safdie as well. Like he's just got this such a unique perspective that I really enjoy just seeing what he does from that perspective. It's just fun to see something so unique and different. But I really enjoyed it. Have you seen this one?
I did, and I was actually going to talk about this too. I saw it. I think it might be one of my absolute favorite films of the year. And I'll just say a few words about it. I think I really liked the Safdie approach. I like Timothy Chalamet. I thought he was just so
Amazing.
energetic, so full of life, and this sort of irrational confidence. Like he does have some reason to be confident, but also you can tell that the confidence is coming also from an irrational place. But I also thought the cast was just so fun, and not like Hollywood central casting, but
Right.
really interesting looking
Yeah.
people, interesting vibes to the people. And if there have been some articles I've read about all the different bit parts and who they're being played by, it's a fun rabbit hole to go down, because I think that gives a lot of life and realism and just unusual flavor to the film. I also like the his main ping pong or table tennis opponent is a deaf Japanese player who is
Oh,
also played by a deaf Japanese ping pong player, and
yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting detail that I liked, and the guy playing the character is like the Deaf Olympics champion in the world, so that was kind of a cool little detail. Um, and I thought one thing that was so interesting about Marty Supreme structurally was, in any kind of movie, you have a character is trying to achieve a goal and they're going to face obstacles along the way. And so it's like, okay, I need to get this money in order to get to Japan. And so
Right.
I'm going to have to try and do a lot of different things. Usually in movies, the character tries to do something and it doesn't work, so they need to do something else. And so they have to face further and further obstacles in order to get what they need. In
Hmm.
this movie, it kept being the case that he basically got what he needed and then lost it. Or he basically got it, it looked like it was going to work, and then things just went disastrously wrong. And I thought, like, structurally, it's basically following the formula of all movies, but just that little twist in detail, I thought made it a really fun and different kind of way of telling the story than you normally see.
It feels a lot more stressful that way, I think, where it's like, oh, he had it and then he lost it. To do that over and over and over again, and to like, you think you're going to have some resolution, even if it's a small resolution, and it just never comes until like the very end of the movie. Like, that's a very interesting way to do it. I don't know that many movies do that, but that does give you that feeling of just like, oh man. And then to just watch him, it's like every decision he makes, you're like, I wouldn't do that. Like, nope, that's not a good. Like the whole movie, you're just constantly like, why is he doing this? And it's just like it does have like a happy ending, and their other films don't necessarily have that same happy ending. But just the whole ride of it, it's a very interesting way to do a movie. Like I guess the way that the structure of it, I don't know that I've seen that in many other people, and maybe that's what this his voice is. The Safdie voice is that, but it's really fun to watch that. It's just so different.
Yeah, I haven't gone back and watched Uncut Gems after seeing Marty Supreme, but I feel like it might be a similar construction there. I think this might be just a little twist on storytelling that the Safdies discovered, and maybe not uniquely discovered, but that's part of their style. And this is what I love about screenwriting and about sort of dissecting these films. And sometimes it seems like we're over talking, we're overthinking. But I think this is a detail that if you're watching the film, you would have a certain feeling watching it, but you wouldn't really understand why you have that feeling.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it really comes from structurally, where is the obstacle, where are they achieving it, where are they failing, and a lot of that you really could kind of chart out. And I think part of that is just this sort of thinking about how you're telling the story, and that then has an emotional impact on the audience. And I think that's so interesting to explore.
And it does help that it has, at least I'm thinking, I've seen Good Time, Uncut Gems, Marty Supreme. They all have, like, the main character has one goal. And like the whole movie, they're just trying to achieve this one thing. And it's just all the things that get in the way. And you think they get it and then they don't. You think they do and then they don't. It's like over and over and over again. Um, but like other movies have that same idea, like where it's like one goal. I was thinking of like 1917. He has to get that message to whatever colonel by the end of the movie, and that's like the whole movie is just him trying to get there. Or like in Gravity, where she's like in space, the whole movie she's trying to get home. But like with these movies with the Safdies, like it's that same style of like one goal. We know that it never changes, and it's just all the things that get in the way. But it's the getting it and losing it over and over again that I think is the difference in what makes this such a different type of movie than other ones like this with a similar story structure.
Yeah, I mean, I think Marty Supreme could have been any number of other sort of like sports underdog stories, but it's such a different. It feels so different because of the way that it's constructed, and I think Timothy Chalamet gets a lot of credit too for his performance. But I definitely would recommend Marty Supreme, and I think this is one battle after another was another favorite film of mine of the year, which has some real dark parts to it, which I would recommend the film to a lot of people, but I know some people who might not want to see some of the things that are in one battle after another. But Marty Supreme, I'd pretty much recommend to most people.
Yeah. It's not because like the whole ping pong structure, like if that's his thing, like it's not even really about ping pong. I mean, it kind of is. That just seems so secondary to the actual story of what's
Yeah,
actually going on here. but it's a fun little addition to it. It's almost like a sports story is like mixed in with a Safdie film. It's kind of funny how like at the end it's like, oh, this is like typical sports story movie, but then it's not because of everything that came before it. It's kind of a it's an interesting one for sure.
I do think that it's just this underlying idea, and sort of this gets said in the movie, but you're the best in the world. Are you making any money at it? And I think that that is just a fun aspect of this as a sports movie, that it's confronting both sides of that.
Right. Yeah, it's all like his internal psychological thing, and I guess he kind of does have like by the end of the movie, you think maybe he's learned something. I think that was my wife's big issue with this was like he's such an unlikable guy. You're like she's like I don't think anything he did was a good thing to do. So I didn't care. Like at the end, it's like I don't care if he gets his thing because I just didn't like him as a person. I'm like, yeah, I could see like some people, they're gonna not get on board with that. I still liked it, but she's like all this buildup and then for what? He just wins the thing. It's like I don't know. She didn't think it was worth the ride to get there, and I think a lot of people would probably feel the same way. But I really enjoyed the ride. If you're down for a really stressful 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah, I found it less stressful than Uncut Gems. I think this would be
Yeah.
a good introduction to the Safdies, and if you like it, dive deeper. But they've made some great films. So, Marty Supreme, I think we both liked it. I also saw The Running Man, which I'll just briefly mention, but I thought
Oh
that was much better than I expected it to be. I thought the original Arnold Schwarzenegger movie was fun, but not a great movie, and kind of more significant for the basic premise than it being an amazing movie. And I thought Glenn Powell again. I think he's so fun. Michael Cera had a fun role in this, and so I thought running. A friend of mine was also in it, so that was cool to see in a bit part. But I thought Running Man, it's not as good as Marty Supreme. It's not one of my, the best movie of the year, but I thought it really delivered on what you would expect it to be from that. If you see a trailer, it's going to be at least as good as you would hope it would be from that trailer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we've talked about Glenn Powell before, but he seems like a fun action star guy. Like you put him in a fun movie, I feel like he would probably deliver. So it's sounding like that's what this is.
Yeah, I think so. I think it also has a pretty interesting uh like the world and it's Edgar Wright directed, which it's not like a
Oh, yeah.
uproarious comedy, but I think that his original flair
Oh,
shines
that's cool.
through, and I think the world building like feels like a little bit more realistic, or a little bit not realistic per se, but a little bit more believable in that, yeah, this makes sense as the kind of world that could yield a show like The Running Man without too many leaps of logic to get there. And so I think like it seemed like not that removed from our actual world, but removed enough in a way that made it so that, yeah, we could all be watching a show where somebody gets hunted to death on TV, and that's the most popular show in America. So
Oh,
I thought that world building really paid off in the story, and I thought that was not that it's like a super thoughtful political message movie, but you need just a little bit there to have that buy in to the storyline.
yeah, and Edgar Wright is a fun director. Feels like the right guy for that type of a story. Yeah, so I'm excited to see that one.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with comedy too, and people talk about this, that movie comedies have just died, and that no one wants to make movie comedies anymore. And Edgar Wright has made so many funny movies, but an interesting point that I've seen people bring up is that it's not so much like there just is not a box office appetite for movie comedies apparently these days. And there
Yeah.
aren't very many being made, and the ones that are made don't do that well. But what you then have is a lot of these comedy people making more action movies and infusing them with some comedy. And you see
Mm.
this with all the Marvel movies. It's a lot of comedy people making those movies. Some of the Marvel movies end up being the funnier movies of the year just because of the
Really?
people involved. and because there's just no industry appetite for making actual comedies. And so this is a way to sort of backdoor some comedy into the movie universe. But I love movie comedies. I wish there were more, but I'm glad that the best people out there are still finding ways to get their voices out there.
They've got to pivot to make it action, comedy with action, then you can sell it. Yeah, there's a lot of movies. I guess that's how a lot of comedies come out these days. Is you're going to have an action movie that's also a little silly or a little funny, and that's the way to do it, which is also fun. But yeah, I miss the old, like the '90s. Just had a lot of good comedies.
Yep.
Miss that.
Yep. One day, I think it's probably cyclical,
It'll come
except
around.
I think that there's also a certain amount of like people can get their comedy from cheap online videos. And so if they're
Yeah,
going to go to the movies, they want something bigger. So maybe it's not cyclical. Maybe movie comedies have just died
maybe
forever.
this is
I hope they come back, but whatever. At least as long as we're laughing, that's what counts, I guess. And we'll be right back after this.
I'm going to tell you something, Peter. Ice cream is good.
And the best ice cream is Dunkin' and Bliss.
And did you know that Dunkin' and Bliss ice cream is now available nationwide?
Wait, nationwide? That's like the whole nation.
Indeed, it is.
That means anyone can try their famous flavors like Fat Boy Butterscotch, Fudge the Police, Peach Better Have My Honey, and there's always ice cream in the banana stand.
You know, some people say Dunkin' and Bliss ice cream cures depression. Not Dunkin' and Bliss, they legally can't.
And other people have said Dunkin' and Bliss ice cream made them a better person.
It's certainly done that for you.
Try Dunkin' and Bliss ice cream today. It's not just for fat people. And we are back. All right, so let's get into our film of the week, Spirited Away. Andrew, what can you tell us about that?
Spirited Away is from 2001, a Miyazaki film. A young girl, Chihiro, becomes trapped in a strange new world of spirits. When her parents undergo a mysterious transformation, she must call upon the courage she never knew she had to free her family. This was I think when you watch this movie, it's Japanese movie. It's definitely a different style of movie than your typical American-made animated movie. When I think of like Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, Illumination, these big animated animation production companies that make all the movies in America, at least, this feels very different than those types of movies. And like right off the bat, I feel like you can tell this is not your typical animated movie. Miyazaki has a style, a perspective, the way he does things. But yeah, I feel like this is very firmly not American animated movie, even though it is for kids. Did you get that sense?
Yep, I got the sense that it was not American. I got, but I think also, yeah, as an animated film, I think there's a definite sort of expectation in America of what it means to be a like a kids movie or a family movie in terms of the way that the kinds of stories we tell, the kinds of relationships that are there, and I think, and then sometimes we'll have an animated movie for adults, but this
Mhm.
is interesting because, and this was my first time seeing this, and so we should discuss that what we were bringing into the movie. But it was very interesting to me. It's about a kid. It's centering on a kid, and it really is a story for kids, but it's not it's not telling a sort of whitewashed
Mm.
or like purely moralistic kind of fairy tale story to kids, which I think is the more American approach to movies like this. So I mean, I think this can be, if we have this binary in America of either it's a movie for kids or for adults, this is a little bit hard to peg in that because I would say it takes a more adult approach, but it still really is a kids movie, and so that's, you have to wrap your head around that, I think.
It feels like I was thinking about this. I've seen a lot of Miyazaki movies. I've seen this one before. I really like his style. But this one in particular feels kind of like the traditional fairy tale, like the original Grimm brothers or like Hans Christian Andersen, like before they got the Disney-fied version of it. Like they were dark. Like there was in those original fairy tales, if you've ever read them, is the kids do get eaten by a monster, or your parents can get turned into pigs, or you could get turned into coal. You could lose an arm. There's going to be a lot of tears. It's a lot of like scary stuff that's out there. If you don't follow the rules exactly, these really scary things could happen to you. And so I think it's more in that vein of like how these fairy tales used to be, almost like Hansel and Gretel or something, where there's a little bit of fear to it. You're trying to, I don't know if his intent is to scare kids. I don't think it is, but there's very scary elements to this that a young kid I don't think would enjoy watching because it might be a little too intense or a little too scary for them. But it's somewhere in that vein, I feel like, of just getting it a little more raw and at the original source of these things.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting sort of creative space to be in. And I think that's something that as a kid, I had all sorts of interests and all sorts of knowledge and all sorts of, fears. And as an adult, I find myself leaning toward oversimplifying what it means to be a child, and that
Mm.
like kids are not going to understand these things, and they're going to be. I think a little bit. I expect kids to be a little bit more the Disney version of kids, even though when I think about it, that's not how I lived as a kid. But I think
Right.
that idea of like, oh, you couldn't possibly understand this, or you couldn't possibly like, why would you even be afraid of that? I don't know, but like, I think kids are much more complicated than as adults we often give them credit for. And I think that a lot is what Miyazaki is exploring, and the
It's
ideas that would be scary or that would be interesting that a kid would think about. And I think he's not afraid to say like, this kid or the story for kids that I'm telling, they don't need to be the cleaned up version. This is a little bit diving deeper into what kids might actually be worried about or thinking about.
because the world that they're in is so unique where it's almost every time something happens, you're like, that was unexpected. I did not see that coming. But to a kid, like as a kid, that all seems plausible. Like really, as you're growing up, you don't know how the world works. And so you would think, oh, that could happen. Like maybe this is a real thing that can happen. And those become fears or things that you get scared about. And so it's almost like I feel like he's making this movie about kids more than even for kids. Like he
Mm.
does a really good job of just showing, like the main character, the main girl is in this, feels like a real kid, like an actual kid in real life, as opposed to the kid that's put into a story to make for kids, like a fun, goofy character. But this feels like a real person with real fears and emotions. And so I feel like he does this with a lot of his movies where he really grasps what it means to be a kid and then puts a real kid in the movie. And so it feels like it's about them more than for them.
I read that he had, I think, a daughter who was like 10. I mean, the movie took a while to make, but like 10 to 12 or so. And he felt like there weren't movies that were for her and her age group, in that sort of level of, you're not necessarily worried about the puberty things, or like relationships and the things that we think of as teenagers caring about, but you're also not just like a little child. And so that sort of in between, you
Mhm.
could call it tween, but that sort of like in between age was something that he was exploring. And I don't, yeah, I heard that he was inspired to make a film for them. I guess it's an interesting question of, does it work as being a film for kids, or is it really using that as a jumping off point to make a film for adults about kids?
Yeah,
Um,
because this one does feel more mature. Like that 10 to 12 range is probably, you know, I started watching it. My youngest kids were like, not on board. It was a little too scary. But my 10-year-old really liked this movie. And he's never seen, this isn't your typical Disney movie, but he found it really interesting and sat through the whole thing and watched it with me. So I think there is something to that age range that he was narrowing in on, that there's not a lot of movies about that where it's just a little more mature than your basic kids movie, but not quite an adult movie. Doesn't deal with the teenage stuff, but it's not just a kids movie. Yeah, that's like a good balance that he found here.
Yeah, it's like kids, smart kids who understand a fair amount about the world, but not as much as adults, and don't really care about romance yet. That's an
Yeah,
interesting sort of spot to explore.
that's true that there's not many movies for that specific demographic.
Yeah.
It's only like 3 years of life, but yeah.
There was a fascinating film I saw. It was a documentary. I think it was called Children of the Underground, but it was about Romanian children living in like a abandoned subway station, and,
Mm.
and it was like, I mean, it's very dark because it's these kids just living on their own in a subway station. But it was so fascinating to me to see like this world of like 10-year olds being in charge, and they're 7-year olds who are answering to them, and 5-year olds that they're looking out for. And like, I think if you have a family, usually the kids play a kid role, and I think that's normal. I think that's good, but I think kids are capable of doing more than just being the sort of passive kids in an adult led world. And I don't think they should live in a Romanian subway station. I think that should be avoided when possible. But the idea that, like, I think it's a really interesting idea to think about as a kid. What would I do if I were on my own? How would I explore this world? And I think that it's not like she does care about getting her parents back and getting back to life, but it also, so much of it is just her being on her own and exploring this world. And we
Yeah.
should say this world, there are all sorts of kind of fantastical creatures and different spirits and different. I mean, it's a little hard. I don't know how much of this is drawn from, these are specific tropes that exist in Japanese folklore, and how much of this is Miyazaki and his team just making these up from scratch. But to me, it's just a wide array of fantastical creatures coming in and out of this bathhouse where she ends up living and working. And so it's an interesting visually, just all of these different creatures, and she's trying to eventually get back to her family who have been transformed into pigs through this sort of magical spells and things like that. And so, but along the way, she's learning and she's doing things on her own. It's not a super plot heavy movie. It's more, I think, about exploring this world and about exploring this time of sort of this child learning about the world around her.
Yeah, that's a good point that it's not super plot driven as more of just exploration driven. And I think that's something that Miyazaki does really well. That as another way that this stands out from like a Pixar type movie, where with the Disney and the Pixar, you feel like there's real structure to those things. Like, you know, when this is supposed to happen and then this thing's supposed to happen, you can kind of predict where that's going. With this movie, it's very hard to predict where things are headed at any moment. It's just so, um, the world he builds is so unique, unusual in a way. It's like, and I think one of the things he does well about that is he's not like explaining why it is this way. He'll tell you the rules, or somebody will tell you the rules, or you'll like learn this is a rule in this world. But there's no backstory of like, oh, this all happened because somebody lost an amulet, or because this person just got their new powers. And the goal of the movie isn't to like help everybody in the world get back to the normal world. It's just for her to get back to where she was before. You know, like in, if this happened in say like Frozen, you know, the whole world changes and then it's like we got to get everything back. But in this, it's like this world still exists at the end of the movie. She was there and then she leaves. It's more like I was thinking like an Alice in Wonderland type story where it's like you transform to go into this world and then you have this whole experience and adventure and then you come out a different person. And it's not about changing the world, it's about changing yourself. And I think that's a different type of story than a lot of animated movies are. That's done really well of like, you know, at the end of the movie, you have these kind of bookend with She starts off, she's moving to a new location, starting a new school, and at the end, it's like, "Are you scared? For your first day of school?" And she's like, "No, I'm not scared anymore." And that's kind of like, holding the whole thing together. Of like she's grown throughout this movie, and I think that's what this whole story offers her is like you now know more about yourself. You've grown, you've changed, learned about yourself more than like I'm going to change the world.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of interesting ideas in this. I should say that I did not enjoy it. I don't. So I know a lot of people love this movie, and I think that there's a lot to be said for it. I think my personal taste, though, I think a couple things just got in the way of me enjoying it. I am not too uh, too big a fan of the sort of Japanese animation style. That's just
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. It's just not what I'm used to. It's not really what I like, and maybe I could just push through and break myself of that and enjoy it more. But it's a very distinctive style, and it's not really my bag. Um, and I also think that discussing this film, there's so much depth to it, but watching it, I did. It was hard to like. I wanted it to be a little bit simpler. I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the I think it is probably working on the levels that it wanted to work, but I think that I wanted the movie to be a little bit plot heavier, a little bit clearer in the way that it played out, and I think a little bit that's. I think it was. I think it's sort of a perfect storm of different things. A movie, I have a preconception of what a kids movie should look like. I have sort of prejudice against certain kinds of animation styles. I want a little bit of more of a plot driven story, and any one of those I can definitely sort of bend on. But it was, I feel like it was a little bit of a perfect storm of things that I don't like. So I
Just a
guess that's
bunch of
my
things.
personal opinion take on it.
I mean, that makes sense. It is, if you go into this having not seen a story like this, I think it might be hard to wrap your head around. I could see a lot of kids being like, I don't get this, like it just doesn't match up with everything you've seen growing up. Maybe if you're from Japan, this is the type of stories they tell there. It's very similar to his other movies, I think, in the way he tells the story. I find the animation very beautiful. I think it's really cool to look at. And I like the way that he does the people, even though there's a lot of fantastical characters, the people, like he's drawing them realistically. It's not like a Pixar where everything looks smoothed over and really clean and cute. Like everything that there are rough edges to this, and the movements they make, like they walk, like as they open a door, it opens in real speed. They close it in real speed. Everything is kind of taken into account of like this is supposed to feel like a live action movie in a way, even though it looks a lot nicer and there are fantastical things that happen, but it's almost directed in that way as well. And so I think that's another reason why it kind of, you're not used to that with an animated movie, to make it feel almost directed like it is live action, even though it's not. And there's a weird balance to that. So I really like it because it is so different and unique. I like seeing that style, just seeing that something else is out there, that you could do a movie like this and make it work. But I think a lot of people, if you're unfamiliar with this, that could be a hard thing to get on board with, at least as a first viewing.
Would this be the Miyazaki film you would start with, or would there be another one if you wanted to immerse yourself in this and get used to the style and try to
Hmm.
drink the Kool Aid? Which one would you start with?
I think,
And yeah,
yeah, this one is a little bit more fantastical and a little darker than a lot of the other ones. I think of he makes other movies that are more for everybody, like the whole family could watch, young kids to old kids. My personal favorite is called Totoro.
mm,
And you might have seen like this big furry rabbit monster guy, but
yeah.
it's about kids that are like 5 and maybe 7, and they move to a new location and they find this magical creature. But I think that one's a lot more family friendly and fun and easy to get along with. And I think if you hadn't seen one, that would be one that I would recommend to start with. I think that might be his best one. And it's like I said, like it's about kids. Is he just knows how to get like the little movements, the little things, the way that kids think. He's so good at that that it just they feel like real people. And I think that might be one of the things I like most about his movies is that he just captures the essence of childhood so well. Um, I'd say, yeah, Totoro. Um, I really liked Howl's Moving Castle. I think Spirited Away might be the darkest of the ones that I've seen.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I think there's if you're interested, there's a lot out there. But yeah.
that's interesting. I there was I think that this is something that this is a style that a lot of people love. Like they look at it as a real positive, this animation style, and I
Mhm.
look at it as a negative, but that's of course just personal opinion.
Right.
Some people are seeking out this kind of style, so I would say it's worth giving it a try, even if it's not what you're initially interested in. Maybe you'll love it, and maybe you won't, but you can look past it. I would say I don't. Yeah, I've said my piece on how I feel about the animation, but I would say that it does a great job of doing things that you could only do in animation. And I think that
Mhm.
there are a lot of animated films where it's basically a live action film. I mean, a lot of Disney movies, especially now when you see that they're being remade as live
Right.
action movies,
Live action remakes.
they're basically a live action story that either because of some kind of special effects, they made it animated, or just simply to target children, they made it animated. But there's nothing that needs to be animated about the story.
Hmm.
And I think with Spirited Away, there's a lot in the world building that is taking full advantage of the fact that it's animated and that you can do things in the way that you draw the different characters, have different sizes of different, whether it's the
Right.
sprites that are jumping around or the grandmother figure with her giant head. I mean, all of these playing with the way that we're seeing these characters, the kinds of characters we're seeing that I think you could only do in animation and not in live action.
Yeah, the size differences of the people, everything just being a little off of what you imagine, I think would be very hard to do in live action. That's true. So he does take full advantage of if I'm going to animate something you're not going to see anywhere else. That's true.
Right. There was one element of this that I thought was interesting. So there's another character, and it comes out that he is actually like the embodiment of a river. And I thought that I just had a little bit of a side note on this, but I used to live in New Zealand uh, and near the Wanganui River, which got legal personhood in New Zealand,
Really?
and so it was like it had legal rights like a person, and I was like, so that seeing this character representing the river made me think of that. It also and I never got an answer to this when I lived in New Zealand, and I'm not sure. They're like, I know a lot of people drown in that river. So how does that how does that work for the legal personhood of the river? Like, if are you
Dark murder.
like, do they have to put that river on trial every time someone drowns?
It is an interesting cultural difference when yeah, like that this river spirit is embodied as a human being. The idea that everything has a spirit, I was thinking like this almost feels very biblical in nature. Like if you were like the Old Testament, they have these like they're talking about like angels and they have like, seven eyes and all these hands and wings, and this is the, a water being, but it's also a person. Or you have these fantastical stories where it's like David versus Goliath, or the ark and the flood. Like they seem bigger than life. They seem like, oh, that couldn't have actually happened, could it? Like this, it almost seems like it's too far off to actually believe as like an adult. But as a kid, you read it and you're like, oh yeah, like that could have happened. Like I think it's in that realm of the way that he does these things of like thinking from a kid's perspective, everything is possible. All of this stuff could happen and make sense. And I think he takes a lot of like he really goes all the way into that to make it fun and to show it all. That's a really fun way to do that.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know if you've read this in the German version of the Bible, but in in the Einheitsübersetzung that's used officially by the Catholic and Lutheran Church in Germany, there's a additional chapter of the book of Daniel where Daniel fights a dragon. That's
Oh yeah,
like, I mean, so I think it would be called apocrypha in English, but in the official German Bible, that's just part of the Bible with Daniel. Like I think he uses a bomb to blow up the dragon or something.
yeah.
It's an interesting extra little chapter in the book of Daniel. So I mean, that could have been in here too.
I feel like that could have been like it's all the same. It's almost like the apocrypha of the Bible. That's what we're watching here. Just all these stories that like they didn't make the main cut, but like they're still fun stories.
Yeah. Yeah. So Spirited Away. Before we get into remaking it, if you were, I guess my opinion is it just didn't work for me. I think there's a lot that's going on here. I just did not enjoy it. And I think one of my kids said, I don't really enjoy watching it, but it's hard to look away, and I just get
Yeah.
sucked into it. I think it does sort of like pull you in because it is such a distinctive style and distinctive universe that it creates in there. But it didn't really work for me, and so I think that a lot of smart people love it. I think you should give it a chance, but I can't guarantee it'll work for the random listener. What would you say though in your pitch to get people to give it a try?
So this was not the first Miyazaki I watched. I watched some other ones before this, and I haven't seen this one. I don't know, in maybe 10 years, 5 6 years at least. But I feel like rewatching it this time, having seen his other stuff, and watching this again, I was really drawn into this movie, and it is even better than I remembered it being. I remember thinking this was okay when I first watched it. Like, yeah, that was pretty good. I like his other ones better. But watching it again this time, I'm seeing things I didn't notice before because I think it takes some time to familiarize with the style and with the world. And once you have seen it once, like if you give yourself some time and go back to it, that it's a lot easier and more fun watch. And you notice the details that he does so well and kind of the overarching story and the little themes they have throughout it that I think it makes it really a rewarding film to watch with a lot of depth to it that you can miss the first time because it's not the easiest thing to get on board with. So I'd say give it a shot and maybe watch the other ones if you're some interest to it. If it's just not for you, it's not your thing. But there may be some value to a rewatch down the road.
If we were now asked to remake this film, starting off as a family movie, and and this is an interesting one in terms of is this a family movie? I think it's we can discuss, but if this do we make the family movie version of this differently? Do we make just the adult version of this? What would be your approach here?
So I was thinking, I know this is technically a family movie. It's PG. I think it's a little scary for young kids. But I was thinking when I was watching this time, there are so many elements of this that I feel like could fit in a horror movie that you could do an adult version of this that could be kind of scary if you went all in on it. Because it's reminding me of like, you have this old lady with a bigger head than normal. The baby's this weird size. You have these weird creatures. Nothing acts like normal. And I think the music, if you were to change the score of the music, because it's pretty uplifting most of the time, if you made this like a horror soundtrack and there was a little more jump scares and like, not good things happening all the time, like I think you could pretty easily just change a little bit and make this more horror movie that would be more adult like. You could maybe a PG-13 movie. You could show a lot more blood. I know there is some in here that's a little scary, but I think that this is almost there as is. And he's just taken a step back to make it a kid movie. I feel like it's really close. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean it's really treading this line of it does remind me a little bit of Pan's Labyrinth, which is
Yeah.
also sort of a live action different story, but like some overlap there. I think this could be a horror film. I mean, I think you could clean this up and do the Disney version, and I
Yeah.
think that would. I think there'd be a child audience for that. I don't think it would be a better film by any means, or would be worth making necessarily.
Right.
I think to make it more adult, yeah, you would just need a few little changes. It 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 also, like, I think when the parents get turned into pigs, reminded me also of like in Pinocchio when the boys get turned into donkeys, and it's like it's taking all the scariest parts of every animated film you've seen and turning it. It's just a greatest hits collection of that. Um, I I think it is an interesting question. If you're going to make it an adult centered movie, what is the role of the child protagonist then? Is it still that central child, but now there's a lot of death and blood and stuff? Or do you change the protagonist, take this universe, but make it, like Leon the Professional, where it's there is a kid, but it's an action movie with with an adult who's technically the protagonist. Is it something more like that within this universe? Because I do think it's a tricky question of to really just have a child at the center of a
Hmm.
horror movie like this. Um, did make me think a little bit of Weapons, which the sort of the witch character both in this and that, some similarity there, and the relationship between like horror movies, scary stuff, and children. It so I think that to me though would be the trickiest question of this is a movie about a child, and I think to then I think part of what this movie is doing is it's introducing all these fears that are kind of child specific fears. Whereas if you just have a lot of death and blood, those are just sort of objective,
Yeah.
rational fears of life. And so then you're removing it a little bit of like the whole point of having it centered on a child.
Hmm. That when you say it like that, it does seem a little bit harder than it feels like it's almost there. But that's a good point. Like the child, it's so central to the child that I think it would be hard to make this anything else. I'm having a hard time picturing how you could do it with a child. There's probably a way. If you added like adults to this and put them in this world, would it be as scary for them? I don't know. Possibly. There's a lot of like these rituals, there's a lot of spells and people being cursed and these weird creatures. I mean, if you had somebody like Ari Aster take this idea and work with that, I feel like he could get something crazy out of that. Um, but yeah, that could be more difficult than I'm thinking originally.
I mean, I think it kind of is like a children's version of a horror movie
Yeah.
already. Like, and I think like the children's version of a horror movie is going to be fundamentally different. But I think that kind of is already what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there, maybe not the cleanest answer, but there, that's our thought process.
Yeah.
So, what about no budget or giant budget? How would you approach that with this?
It's hard to know how low a budget this was. It's animated. Let me see. Oh, 20 million. Is that what it was? Wow. Okay, so that wasn't like a small, tiny budget, but as an animated movie, I feel like you could probably do this a little cheaper if you did a lot of CGI. Like I think this was all hand drawn, and that
Hmm.
takes a lot of time. I don't know. I'm assuming this is a years takes years and years to make all of those scenes look so beautiful. You could definitely make a cheaper version of this by not having the animation not look as clean. Um, but I don't know. Like, it's almost more interesting to think like, what would you do with a huge budget on this film? Could you make this better with a lot more money? And as an animated movie, I don't know that you could either. Like, this feels like if you were to cut the budget and be like, make it really cheap animation, like for TV animated type movie. I think the story is there that some kids are going to connect with that, and it's going to be really good, and like it still hold up. But if you added a lot more time and money, I don't know what else you could do to this to make it look better. Like it's already looks how they want it to look. So I think that's a tough for this movie specifically, unless you were to go live action with it, which we've discussed. I don't know if that's possible either. A really interesting movie.
Yeah. I had a thought. There's a film that I've seen called On the Silver Globe, which is it's a bizarre movie. It's a Polish sci-fi movie, and it's like a bunch of astronauts, like Polish astronauts, land on a different society or on a different planet, and then like they either they form a new society or they become part of a new society. There's another even different like Russian film called "It's Hard to Be a God," which is again like astronauts land on a different planet where that planet is in the Middle Ages. There's something about Eastern European during the Cold War interest in astronauts landing on other planets with existing societies. But in that film, it was all live action, and but like the way that these Polish, in the 1970s filmmakers were depicting like the astronauts, the people on this other planet, the costumes, the makeup. It was so different from what I'm used to, either in American Hollywood or even American independent film. It was just American. It was just starting from a different sort of cultural place in terms of what things should look like. And I think that to me, as an American watching Spirited Away, is interesting. Um, I think there's so much about the film that is particular to the way in which it's animated and to the style of that I don't I just don't know the economics of the animation and how much you could change with that. But I do think it'd be interesting to see like what the same people would do if they had to do this with cheap costumes. Like if you tasked those people, not me, because I would do it in a boring way that I would not surprise myself with. But I'm interested in if you task that team with depicting their ideas in a cheaper way. And by making like summer camp, we're going to put on a play, we're going to do that, we're going to build the costumes with the materials we have available to us. What would that look like? And I think that would be really interesting to see, because I bet they would come up with totally different ways of depicting those creatures than I would have imagined. And so I think like that would be a really interesting exercise to see not what they would do if they could totally fulfill their vision, but if they had to do it the cheap version, what would they make that look like? And so I couldn't remake it that way, but I'd be curious to see that remade version.
What people could do. It's like a Guillermo del Toro, like Pan's Labyrinth, that type of a live action version of this, people with costumes. If you did that cheap, could it work? Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, and I think it probably wouldn't be, in Pan's Labyrinth, I don't think it would be as good, but I'd be very curious to see like what that team would do if they were just doing they make one trip to Michael's or Hobby Lobby or something. They come up with some costume stuff, and now here's what we're doing. Like I think that would be really interesting to see. What about a TV show, whether a 10-part Netflix series or other kind of TV show? How would you approach that with this?
So I think the world building in this, the actual world that she enters, is so interesting. I feel like you could get a lot of stories out of this. So I think a TV show, like if you were to pitch a TV show based in this world, I'd be very interested in that. I think there's a lot of these side characters that must have interesting backstories. How did they get here? To learn more about how this world even came about. And there's just so many people. And you have it's at a bathhouse. So we have customers that come and go. So I think it'd be really fun. And you'd have a lot to play with here of just, you could have any being that you could create show up at the bathhouse for whatever reason you want, and then leave whenever you need them to. It seems like it has a foundation there that you could build a show around that could go for a long time. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I agree. I think this is really set up well for a TV show. Um, I think it's not a super plot driven movie. And so I think like the individual plots of episodes could like it's not like you're missing out on the overarching plot of the movie if you just break it up into little episodes. So I think I would just explore this world. And I think like with a lot of TV pilots, a big part of the way that you structure that is we have an existing world and now a new character comes in and we get to introduce that new character to the world. And then by doing that, we're introducing the audience to the world. So I think I would just approach it that way, as she's entering this world, and eventually I guess she's going to make it home. But for a couple seasons at least, she can just be in this world experiencing it, and also serve as the proxy for the audience in terms of learning about what the rules are and who these characters are.
And you could even have her leave at the end of the first season or whatever and just stick with the other people there because the world goes on without her. Anyway, that there's a lot of different ways you could go with this. That could be really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if the actress demands too much money at the end of the first season, then just let her go and keep the show going.
Yeah.
So, okay, so those are some ideas. I think it's an interesting one. It's a very distinctive style of film, and so it's a little hard to think about how we would recreate it. I think it's hard to. So much of it is Miyazaki's vision. I think that it's a little bit hard to say, oh, I've got a totally better version for this. But do you think any of those versions, ideas we came up with would be an improvement on this?
No, it's just so hard to think of how else to do this movie other than the way he did it. It's just so uniquely his vision. I'd be interested to see if he were to do a TV show. That would be something. If somebody else were to do it, I don't know that I would trust it to be any good, just because it seems so unique to him and his perspective. So yeah, I think the movie's just the best version of this.
I would be curious. I don't know if you've seen the movie. Well, there's the movie Rushmore, and like a Wet Hot American Summer or Theater Camp. But there are a few movies where you see really ambitious amateur productions of like bigger stories. I'd be interested to see like a movie about like a summer camp version of Spirited Away. What would that look like? Um,
To try
that
to make a play out
that
of it.
that might be my go-to. Not that that would be better than Spirited Away, although honestly, I might prefer it because I didn't really love the experience of watching this. But I think that would be an interesting approach to, if you had to recreate it, maybe do sort of a meta recreation. I finish my thinking about Spirited Away with appreciation for the film. I think it's definitely worth a watch, but it's just not exactly my taste, and I think that's okay. I you know, maybe I'm just dumb for not getting it, but not every film is going to appeal to everybody. So I guess that's my take on it. I definitely think that there's a lot going on in it. There's a lot of smart stuff and a lot to love about it, and I think it's definitely worth giving it a try. Andrew, final words on it?
Yeah, I feel like I like the the fact that it's not for everybody is part of the reason I really like it. I think it really goes for something. It's very unique, and I think it's worth giving it a shot to see if it is your thing. Because if you do connect with it, I think you'll think it's an amazing movie. But it not being for everybody, that's part of the appeal and the charm of it to me.
There you go. I think that's what's great about film, what's great about art. So check it out, Spirited Away. And there we have it. Thanks for joining us for this episode of How to Make Films That Influence People. Check us out at howtomakefilmspodcast.com. We'll see you next time.